What was the Colosseum? The Colosseum was it was a killing field. Let's be real here. The Colosseum was a killing field. They estimate that around 500,000 or so people were slaughtered in the Colosseum. People were butchered for entertainment. Christians were fed to lions and other wild and violent animals. And people were put through all sorts of excruciating deaths. You had people who were ritually sacrificed in the Colosseum. Yes, human sacrifice was a thing in the Roman Empire. People don't really talk about that. They just say, oh, human sacrifice, that was something that the Aztecs did. But no, the Romans actually did have human sacrifice. They would take people and they would dress them up as particular deities, and then they would have them butchered in the Colosseum. And why would they dress them up as some deities, as some particular deities? The reason for this was because it was a ritual. It was the gladiatorial games, the matches. It was seen as ritualistic as well as entertaining. And it's only entertaining for evil and demonic people. Tertullian tells us that the gladiatorial matches were satanic, and St. Augustine, I believe in his Confessions, also describes the gladiatorial games as demonic, and he says that Christians should not attend these games. Augustine recounts one story in his autobiography in which a young Christian university student was being pressured by his pagan friends to go to the arena to watch the gladiatorial matches. Now, you can just imagine this. I mean, imagine a Christian university student. He's in his late teens, early 20s, somewhere around there. He's a young Christian. And this was at a time when the majority of people in the Roman Empire were Christian. I mean, it's really just trying to imagine it. It's like a movie. And you could totally see this sort of thing in a modern context as well. Or you can even liken it to a modern context, but you have this young man who is not going to the gladiatorial matches, and his friends are always telling him, why aren't you going to the gladiatorial games, etc., etc. And he says, well, I'm a Christian. It's against my religion to go and watch people butcher each other for entertainment. I mean, it's a pretty sick thing to do. So one day, they physically grab this kid, this young Christian university student. They grab him, and then they force him into the Colosseum. And they force him, and he says, no, and he tries to fight back, and he tries to struggle, but he's outmanned, he's outnumbered, he's not strong enough to resist this gang of heathens. And they take him to the arena, they sit him down, and they say, you're going to sit here and you're going to watch this. And now you have to ask yourself, why would people be so insistent on people watching others butcher each other? If it was simply seen as a form of mere entertainment, why would a society be offended by someone refusing to go to such a bloody and violent spectacle? The answer is very simple. The answer is because it was religious. And Tertullian even tells us in one of his books that the heathens, the pagans of the Roman Empire, hated the Christians for a number of reasons, one of which was that the Christians did not attend the arena, did not see the shows in the arena, the shows, one of which was the gladiatorial matches.
crowd. What's wrong?
They want blood.
They were driven to a frenzy by Sakir. Wouldn't kill his man, though they screamed for him to do it.
If the Emperor had been here, he wouldn't have had a choice. Wait till the show tomorrow. He'll get his quota of killing out of you if you have the luck to win.
Not one life will he get from me.
Won't he? Try saying that to the Emperor. His divine self will soon teach you the ways here.
When he says death, death it is.
The true God says life. I only answer to him.
Hark at this man.
What world does he think he's living in?
Dangerous God to follow, by God, if he contradicts the Emperor.
Who do you call your God?
The only one. The rest are inventions of fear, tales taken from the past. They can no more help you than this breast can breathe.
Put him down! Insulting the gods before we go in and fight.
What revenge will Mars take upon us for this?
None at all. He doesn't exist.
Mars doesn't exist. What do you mean he doesn't exist?
Protect us from this.
Keep your mouth shut. The real God is greater than any man's thought can imagine. He made life as deep and strong as the sea. Your gods are as shallow as a reeking pond. He's above us and around us, in us, like the breath in our bodies. And he has one law that we break at our peril. The law is love. Whatever we do that breaks that law condemns us. And so that we should see what his love is, he sent his son to live the life of a man, to show that God understands the life he has made.
Who spun you this?
What do you want us to do,
All very well talking, but what good will he do us out there in the arena?
Before we lose the goodwill of the gods we know.
Tomorrow in the arena, show the Emperor that we know what life's worth. Throw away your weapons. Do you think all the things of the earth and the heavens have been made for no other reason except that we should eat and make money and spawn children and kill and die? What a purpose for creation. If anything is beyond belief, that is. God said, burn away the old world and let a new one rise from the ashes.
The gladiatorial matches were the most popular sport, if you want to call it that, to watch. The second most popular being the chariot races, which were also violent to a certain extent, but nothing like the gladiatorial games. And Tertullian tells us that the pagans considered the Christians to be an offense to the gods because they did not go to the gladiatorial matches. How did the gladiatorial matches originate? Where did it come from? How was it created? How was it invented? Did some Roman opportunists just get together and say, let's make some money, let's have people kill each other for entertainment? Well, that did happen eventually. It came to the point where the gladiatorial matches did become a business. But that's not where it originated. That's part of the story, but that's not the origins. The origin of the gladiatorial matches was found in the Etruscan people of Italy. And what we learned from Tertullian was that the Etruscans, who were really the ancestors of the Tuscan Italians. So when you think of Italy, you think of which areas? You think of Rome, but you also think of Tuscany, right? Tuscany is a very famous travel destination for people going to Italy. Tuscany, Tuscan wine, Tuscan bread, Tuscan soup, whatever. Tuscan tomato soup, the Tuscany diet, and all this stuff. Well, the original Tuscan people came from the Etruscans. They were descendants of the Etruscans who migrated from Anatolia, what is today known as Turkey, to Italy. And Tertullian tells us that they brought with them this ritual of human sacrifice, in which once a year, wealthy families would take a slave and then they would ritually murder the slave. So you were in a wealthy family, you had slaves. Once a year, you took a slave, you slit the slave's throat. The blood dropping to the earth was seen as a propitiation to please the gods. And all the wealthy families amongst the Etruscans would do this. Then, after some time passed, the Etruscans in Italy, they started getting tired of having to murder someone every single year. So they just didn't want to do it. So they said, well, how about we have two slaves fight each other to the death? The one that dies is the sacrifice. So they said, let's do that. So they would get two slaves, give each one a sword, you're going to fight each other. And this is where the gladiatorial matches began. This ritual eventually spread through much of Italy, and it eventually became a form of entertainment, and it was also seen as a form of making money, because the people who would organize these matches, well, they saw it as a business venture. As sick as that is, that's how they saw it. They saw it as business. But the religious nature of the gladiatorial matches remained and never fully went away. Because as Tertullian explains to us, before these gladiatorial matches would commence, they would have priests go into the arena and do a procession of the gods. Some sort of a procession. So a priest would hold up, I believe, an image of the sun or an image of Venus, something like that. And Tertullian also tells us about how in the middle of the arena, I believe it was in the middle of the arena, there would be a little, like a little monument and dedication to Venus and things like that. So Tertullian tells us that these gladiatorial matches were in fact pagan, and even after they became a form of entertainment, or even during when they were a form of entertainment, the religious roots of the act still remained, and they were still remembered, given the fact that priests would be involved in these spectacles, these murderous spectacles. So it's all heathenism. And what Augustine tells us, going back to the young Christian university student who was forced to see a gladiatorial match, is that he began to open his eyes and actually watch the fighting. If I remember correctly, I believe that Augustine recounts that the young man turned his face away, or he closed his eyes so as not to see the bloodshed. But eventually he opened his eyes and began to watch it. And he began to conform to the peer pressure. So as time went on, he actually began to enjoy what he was watching. And then he actually began to voluntarily and willfully go to these matches, and he just started to enjoy them. I believe Augustine, it's either Augustine or Tertullian, tells us that there were cases of people actually becoming demonically possessed as they were watching these matches. So it was all very demonic stuff. They were originally an Etruscan invention, a form of human sacrifice in which a pair of gladiators fought to the death at the funeral of an important figure, and appeared in Rome 2 centuries after the Gallic sack in 387 BC. Isn't it interesting that all these pagan cultures, they have this idea of killing a bunch of people once someone important has died? Isn't that crazy how that happens? That cannot be coincidental. So, for example, in Scandinavian culture, pre-Christian Scandinavian culture, when a very important clan leader died, what would they do? Well, according to Ahmed ibn Fadlan, if the man had a daughter, they would fill her up with drugs. Yep, this is the based pagan Thor's hammer Scandinavian religion that these neo-Nazi LARPers, or these trad LARPers, like to be so infatuated with. So if someone important died in pre-Christian Scandinavian culture, they would take the daughter of this guy. They would fill her up with drugs. Then the men would lift her up by her legs, and then they would push her up into the air, and they would say, "What do you see?" And she's all high on LSD, high on magic mushrooms. And she would say, "Oh, I see the brothers of my father. I see the sons of my father," something like that. Then they would take her to a ship, a big old fat ship, a Viking ship. Put her in the ship. Then all these dudes would take turns doing that with her. They would rape her. She's all drugged up. They all took turns raping her. Then they would light the entire ship on fire. So she was considered to be a necessary sacrifice to conduct, because her dad was an important person who had passed away. When you look at Hindu culture, you had this very demonic ritual called sati, in which when a man died, his wife was burned alive. Yes, the Hindus actually did this. And the Hindus, The Hindus, when the good old British came, the British are the evil people. They keep telling us, oh, the British were evil. They're so evil. Oh my God, the British came. They were awful. We could not even burn our wives alive. So when a man died in India, his widow had to be burned alive. That was in the Hindu religion. But I can guarantee you there are people in India who are saying, we need to bring it back. The reason why India is such a shithole is because we are not burning the bitches alive. We could not scam people and get away with it under the British. We did not even have the right to scam our neighbors. But worse than this, worse than this, we did not have a right to burn the bitches alive. The guy dies, you burn the wife alive. Well, where does that come from? If I had to make an educated guess, I would say it comes from Indo-European culture. The Indo-European culture that entered India at one point in time. Maybe they came into India at around 3000, maybe not 3000, maybe 1500, maybe 1800 BC, somewhere around there. But there definitely was an era of Indian history that changed dramatically due to a migration of people into India from Afghanistan or from the Himalayas. But these were definitely Indo-European people who were genetically quite close to people in Ukraine today. People in Ukraine, Belarus, those countries, they were basically ancient Slavs. They went into India and they banged all the chicks. And that's why when you look at Indian DNA, you will see the Aryan DNA is paternal. Why is it paternal? Because it came from a bunch of dudes who went to India and they took all the ladies. Sorry, Indians. But this type of thing has been going on for a long time. It's not just the British tourists who are taking all your chicks. This has been going on for thousands of years. So my guess is that this idea of burning the woman alive after the guy is dead, it's some sort of a variant of this ritual that was practiced by Indo-Europeans, or a variant of some sort of an original ritual that involved human sacrifice subsequent to someone dying. The Etruscans were another European people in ancient times, and they had a ritual. Someone important in the clan has died. Someone has to be sacrificed. That went from just simply slitting a poor slave's throat, a very unfortunate person, very unfortunate and a very evil event, to having two slaves fight to the death. And then from there, it went on to becoming a full-on enormous spectacle that could be seen throughout the Roman Empire. The Egyptians also had something similar to this, where a pharaoh would die and then the slaves were killed with him. And the idea behind that was that by killing his slaves, those slaves are now in the afterlife serving the master. And there have been numerous archaeological discoveries in Egypt where they'll find the tomb of some prestigious figurehead, and what do you know, in the same tomb there's a bunch of other dead people. And who are those dead people? It's the slaves. And then also you go to Julius Caesar's account of his conquest of Gaul, about which I have done numerous videos, which I need to make a playlist for. But it's a very fascinating read. And in Julius Caesar's book, he talks about how the Gauls, who were really just Celtic people, how they would just stick a bunch of people in a giant wooden statue and then light the entire statue on fire, burning everyone inside of it alive. It's pretty horrific stuff. The Chinese did this also. That doesn't surprise me at all. Ancient Chinese civilization reminds me of Egyptian civilization. Just the emperor and the pharaoh and the way that they saw the emperor, the way that the Egyptians and the ancient Chinese saw their respective pharaohs or respective emperors is very similar. I find much similarity between the ancient Egyptian imperial religion and the Incan religion. In the Incan religion, the royal family was seen as being literally descendants from the sun god. The Egyptians had a very similar way of seeing their pharaoh. They saw him as the son of Ra, and also, I believe, as Ra incarnate. And then also the Japanese people in their pagan religion, and I'm pretty certain they are Japanese nationalists who still believe this. In fact, I know that they are because I've read about them. But in the ancient Japanese imperial religion, the emperor is also seen as related to the sun goddess Amaterasu. Yeah, you just see this savagery in pagan society, and it's so strange that you have people today who are telling us that, you know, we should go back to some kind of paganism. All this attempt at reviving paganism, it always leads to some sort of a neo-folk tribalist movement, or even a neo-folkish, neo-pagan, hardcore nationalist ideology, where they'll say things like Christianity comes from the Middle East, it's not native to our land, it's not native to our culture, so therefore we should go back to the original religion of our ancestors. So if you're African, you should go back to pagan African religion. If you're Hispanic, you should be going back to some Aztec shit, some Mayan crazy stuff. If you are Native American, and let's say you're going to a Baptist church, because there are a number of Native Americans who are Baptist, or if you're Roman Catholic and you're natives, because those Catholic natives exist, they'll say that you should go back to worshiping the moon or whatever. And if you're white, you should, if you, let's say you come from an English background, or your ancestors came from Ireland or whatever, you should be going back to some sort of a pre-Christian European religion. And if we are, I mean, for one thing, these pre-Christian religions, they didn't really leave a lot behind, because, well, Christianity came and just destroyed a lot of their materials. When the Spanish invaded Mexico, I mean, the Spanish destroyed so many books that the native civilizations there had written. The Aztecs had written a ton of, the Aztecs had a ton of literature, the Spanish destroyed it. So what we know about the Aztec religion really comes from what the Catholics made copies of, the codexes, which is what they call them, the codexes. And as far as European pre-Christian religion goes, there's not really much there. If you want to start getting into Celtic religion, I mean, you're going to be depending on what some of the Romans wrote. You're going to be depending on maybe what some Christian people had written. You're going to be depending on the archaeological record. It's going to be very sparse for you. So that's why anytime you look at neo-pagan movements, it's always so limited. Everything about their religions, if you want to call them that, is very limited, because their knowledge of the religion that they're claiming to follow is very limited, because of the fact that they're trying to follow a religion that died so many centuries ago. But if you read about what the Romans wrote in regards to these religions, or if you read about what the Christians wrote in regard to pre-Christian European religion, you're going to be reading about human sacrifice and things like that. So the logical conclusion of returning back to paganism would be to actually return back and to revive human sacrifice. I mean, that is the conclusion. That's part of the conclusion, right? Human sacrifice. It's going to be there. And if you look at even the archaeological record when it comes to pagan Europe, you find a lot of evidence for human sacrifice. It's not like the Romans and the Christian writers were all liars. They're all lying, you know. It's all lies. The whole idea of human sacrifice. I mean, they said the same thing about the Spanish literature on human sacrifice in the Aztec civilization. I mean, for a long time, they were saying that the Spaniards were all liars. But then if you actually look at the archaeological data on Aztec civilization, you find so much evidence of human sacrifice. Same thing with Native Americans as well. You look at the archaeological research that's been done on Native American society in North America, and you find tremendous amounts of evidence for human sacrifice. As far as European paganism goes, I mean, you just look at the Bogmen. How many times have archaeologists found dead bodies in these swamps in countries like Denmark? And you find the bodies preserved because they would dump the body into these bogs, and the swamp water, if I can call it that, would actually mummify the body. And you can see it. The most famous one comes from Denmark, and you can see that his throat was slit. And so this was a ritual that these prehistoric Europeans would do. So if you want to go back to paganism, or if you want to go back to the religion of your ancestors, I mean, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be human sacrifice. It'll lead to human sacrifice. That's the bottom line. So you go to the arena and you walk into the Colosseum, and then you take the stairs up. So you go to the seats where people were seated to watch this nightmare. And I remember, and the stadium is huge. The stadium of the Colosseum where people would sit is humongous. It's like being on a football field. And I remember I just said, okay, I am going to sit down on one of these seats, and I'm just going to meditate on the fact that I am sitting down in an ancient killing field where people were butchered for the cause of human entertainment. And I just sat there and I just imagined myself. I imagined to myself what it would be like to be a Christian in the ancient Roman Empire, being forced to be fed to a wild animal as people cheered and mocked you. And I just thought, my God, this place is evil. This is an evil place. This place was used for ginormous, unfathomable evil. And what do you see? People walking around with those giant selfie sticks, taking photos of themselves, mainly women, with those long-ass selfie sticks, and they're taking photos of themselves in the Colosseum. And I'm sitting there watching all this in front of me, and I'm thinking, imagine people going to Auschwitz. Just think about this for one moment. The Colosseum was a place where Christians were mauled to death by starving animals for entertainment. Just imagine how evil that is. Imagine how evil this is. Or they don't even have to be Christians. I mean, there were people who were brought there because they were prisoners of war. And they would just be, people would dress them up as various gods, and they would say, okay, you're Zeus, or you're Saturn, or whatever, and then this god's going to come and kill you, and all this stuff, and that was all. It's like it reminds me of some post-modern, have you ever seen those weird degenerate art shows where they have women doing weird aimless ballerina dances in a circle or something, and then some weird ass heathen music is playing in the background? Sounds like some kind of horror movie. Okay, you probably haven't seen that, but I've seen stuff like this, and there's a lot of that goes on in Europe, by the way. That's what it reminds me of. Like, I'm just imagining thousands upon thousands of people sitting in the auditorium, they're watching, and then all of a sudden, these men are brought into the stage, and one of them is dressed up like the god Saturn or something, and then this weird homosexual looking guy is the announcer, and he says, "Here lies a man, the god Saturn, who ate his babies, and now Lord Zeus comes to punish him." And everyone in the crowd is cheering in ecstasy, and you can hear the crowds of the people like roaring waves, and it just sounds horrifying. It sounds so harrowing and evil, and you see the victim who's about to be killed, and he's exhausted, he's tired, he's dying from stress, and then the crowd cheers as they watch him being butchered. I mean, it sounds like something out of a damn A24 horror movie. That's the kind of shit that was going on in the Colosseum. Christians were told, renounce Christ, worship the emperor, and they didn't want to do it. They said, nope, not doing it. Not going to renounce God. Nope, not going to do it. Not going to renounce Christ. Not going to declare the emperor to be divine. Nope. You guys can all go fuck yourselves. And the heathen said, okay, well, you're going to be fed to some lions. Still not going to do it. Not going to deny Christ. Not going to do it. So they would feed him alive to lions. And that kind of shit was going on in this place called the Colosseum. Honest to God, call me what you want. Compare me to ISIS. I don't give a damn. If I was a dictator in Italy, or if I was like the unquestionable dictator over the European Union, I would just demolish the Colosseum. I would say, listen, I would make a speech. I would make the speech. And I would say, and I would have people in front of me who could speak every language to translate for me. So I'd have some French dude there, some German dude would be there, Czech, Hungarian, all the Polish, they'd all be there. And I would be talking, and then some French dude would be like, and I would, of course, have someone there to translate for all the deaf people. You know, he'd do the sign language thing for the camera. And I would say, listen, we must never forget the atrocities that were done in the Colosseum. I walk into the Colosseum, and I see with utter horror nobody respecting the fact that they are on ground that has been tainted and stained with the blood of innocent people who were butchered as a form of entertainment. And I watch with abhorrence as people are taking selfies in this place where so many people were butchered for such an evil purpose, which is, in this case, watching people get murdered for entertainment. And I would say because people just don't respect the gravity of the crimes that were done here, I have decided to have the Colosseum demolished. An army of men with bulldozers will be here tomorrow morning, and they're going to just destroy the whole thing. And we will have a man in a giant wrecking ball machine, and he is going to lodge his giant wrecking ball into this thing called the Colosseum. It's all coming down. It's going to be bulldozed. It's going to be demolished. We'll maybe use dynamite. Maybe we'll put some dynamite. We'll shut the roads down. No one can drive around it because it'll be too dangerous. And then we're just going to build a giant Walmart on top of it. And that's it. Walmart, we made a deal with them. They're going to decide, they have decided to put some locations in Italy to compete with the native European stores. I don't know what you guys have over there, Aldi's or whatever. And we're going to build a giant Walmart. Giant Walmart. It's going to be a jumbo Walmart. We'll have Italian ingredients. The finest Italian ingredients will be there. Then all the stupid nerds are going to come. They're going to be like, why is destroying history? Oh my God. And I'm going to say, you guys can cry all you want. Don't worry about it. When people come into Walmart and they see how there are going to be millions of products that will be there as options for them to purchase, and when the customer just feels this amazing sense of empowerment by all the options he has, people are just going to forget all about this damn thing called the Colosseum, and it's going to be history. I mean, what's the point of this damn thing? We can make more money with a giant Walmart, so we'll have a giant Walmart there, and all the nerds can come and cry, and they'll mourn the death of the Colosseum. It'll be okay, because people will forget about the Colosseum as they are eating their Walmart ice cream. Gelato. Now imagine 20 years from now, people going to Auschwitz. Because Auschwitz is a place where people were butchered. And it's a place where people were massacred. And it's now a place where tourists visit, right? So Auschwitz was a killing field, like Treblinka was a killing field, like Ravensbrück was a killing field. All these places, all these killing fields, people were used as guinea pigs for human experiments. I mean, it was just evil, right? Absolutely demonic. Imagine 20 years from now, people going to Auschwitz, just like they go to the Colosseum, with those long sticks, taking selfies of themselves. Look, I'm in Auschwitz. I mean, by then, you would have to ask yourself, what's the point of having this concentration camp still remain here if people aren't going to respect the gravity of what happened in Auschwitz? At one point in time, the Colosseum was a place of dread and horror. And now it's just a place where you go to take selfies. The question I have is Auschwitz going to have the same fate as the Colosseum? And I think that as time goes on, as the future transpires, that eventually will be the case. Auschwitz will be a mere tourist site where people will take selfies. And pretty soon, people are just going to really stop caring about something called Auschwitz or something called Treblinka or something called Ravensbrück, etc., etc. And that's it. That is the horrifying reality of human history. The horrifying reality of human history is that humans do not remember history, nor do they learn from history, and nor do they really care about history. And there's something that my father likes to tell me, which is very sad, but it's very true, and that is, when it comes to wars and what happens in the midst of wars, the last thing that people care about is the genociding of human beings. That is actually the last thing that people care about. So what does that mean? What does that imply in light of the Holocaust? What it implies is that the Holocaust will happen again. And the atrocities that took place in World War II, they're going to repeat themselves. Obviously, they're not going to repeat themselves exactly, but roughly, I mean, the same gravity of evil that we saw during World War II, I think will be seen again. Human experimentation, genociding people, the whole thing.